Sorry. So I'm not here to really talk about myself, more about what I've seen and heard happen to me. A lot of you are my family, so you know some of my story. Some of you are my friends, you know some of my story. I'm going to go back a little bit to, say it was right around 93, 94. I was arrested for murder, and it was a pretty bad meth addiction at the time. Meth and just about anything else I could do at the time. So I went to prison for murder, and I realized at that time that I didn't have a moral code. And because I didn't have that moral code, I started looking for one. My moral code was driven by my addiction to meth. And I came across an Edda that was given to me, which is a pagan lore. I read it and I was like, this is it. It spoke to me and I ran with it. I committed myself to it heavily. And the people who know me know that I committed myself heavily to it. I learned the languages, I translated it. I literally every place I stopped after I got out of prison, I set up a place of worship, and I was very committed. That was my first conversion to a faith of any kind. I was raised in a Christian home. Mom and Dad were very diligent in teaching me scripture. And it's amazing just how much it's coming back to me now. That was 31 years I was a pagan. 27 of those years I was a pagan priest called a Gothi. And all I can say is that I don't think there's 24 people in the country that were doing what I was doing. And that was the path I went on. And I only bring that up to point out how far into that I had gone. On March 17th, and I should say this, is there are a few people here who have knowledge of the stuff that I'm speaking. So if I don't speak it right, speak up. Because I'm here to speak about the truth. On March 17th, excuse me, I get choked up about this, so bear with me. On March 17th, I did a ritual where I was trying to level up as a priest. And in the process of that, two things happened. The first is when I approached the gods that I was serving, I drew an absolute blank. And as a priest, that shattered me. Because it occurred to me is that where I was going was empty. In such a way that for me, it broke me. And the next part to that was during that ritual, and I've only told, I think, 2 people about this, maybe 3. I wasn't hallucinating or anything, I wasn't hearing voices. It was just something that happened here, and what I heard was that I am the red heifer, and I am the high priest. And I am the last sacrifice. Well, I fell on my butt at that point and acknowledged during this whole experience that, I can't deny what's right in front of my face. And as a priest, for me to hear that was a big statement. It was a huge statement. Did I convert right then? No. What I did was, shortly after that, my pagan group met out on my property, and I pulled back from them. Said, hey, you know what, my house isn't in order. I was in this huge depression. All right. I have a hard time even describing that depression, and I'm not even prone. I've never been depressed. But I was just in a very dark place, and I found out since that, there were friends and family knew that I was there. But I pulled back. I pulled back because I knew that I couldn't serve these people like I thought I was supposed to. About a month later, I called my brother and I said, hey, you know what, I'm just not gonna come back to the tribe. I'm gonna keep on being a priest. I will serve to the best of my ability, whoever wants it. So I persisted. I didn't just jump on board with this red heifer, last sacrifice, high priest thing. I resisted. And I'm told that even my brother here knew that I was about to convert, but he knew before I did. And I have my little thing here so I don't forget. So that was on the 17th of March. I did that. We had this meeting. I told my brother, I'm thinking a month later. In the process, I was just in such a dark place. I remember going to Easter observance at my family's out in Nixa. And I had such a depression, and I'm seeing all the happiness in people, and I was like, I can't be around this. You know, I can't be that dark cloud around everybody. And, you know, sitting off on the edge and just miserable. So at that point, I pretty much decided, you know, I'm pulling back. I'm not going to be that in other people's lives. I mean, frankly, you know, I wasn't real thrilled when people came around me being a dark cloud. So I definitely didn't want it, and I didn't want to be a burden to others. So I didn't reach out and ask for help. I just stayed in it. My brother Tracy came back from California, and I remember telling him it's just how important it was for just his presence in my life at that time. I needed somebody, anybody to be present with me. And on July 16th, I was swatted. And a couple SWAT vans, about 5 cop cars. They came in, and I was kind of ready for that. I had loaded firearms ready to go. I was expecting it at some point, and when they crossed my property line, an alarm was set off in my cabin. So, as was typical of me, the first thing I did was grab a firearm. My dog, who was in the bedroom at the time, came out and he barked. Not a loud bark like he's been doing all day, but more of just a rough, and he's looking at me. And I had a choice. I mean, it was a very fast thing. It takes me longer to tell you about it than it did for me to think about it. I was perfectly fine dying there that day because I was just in the dark place and I was cool with it. But I loved my dog so much that I didn't want to make that choice for him. You know, and so I had 3 choices at that point. It was either start the shootout, and they were making it real easy in how they came in, or run out the door and into the woods. I had enough space and time for that, or lock up my dog so he didn't die. I chose to lock up my dog because I didn't want him to die. And y'all will meet him here in a little bit, but he was literally the thing that stood between me and being dead, right there. And I say that, you know, my mom gave him to me, and he's been a blessing in my life ever since. And that's why, you know, anybody who knows Rusty knows it's a good dog. So I go to jail. I'm in jail. I'm in the holding. I'd already done 25 years in prison, plus a bunch of little increments. And so that didn't really bother me. What bothered me, and it really just started to eat me up, was that through no decisions of his own, a friend of mine who's here now was losing money. They just killed me. My stress levels went up and I passed out in the holding cell. I laid there for an hour and a half. Jailers did nothing. The guy who was in the cell with me was trying to get their attention. They didn't care. You know, my sense of honor that I had gained as a pagan was still intact, and I just couldn't live with it. It just ate me up. So I ended up getting put in a cubicle, I don't know what you want to call it. But I'm in there, and for reasons that I still do not know, Wright County decided to farm me out to Douglas County, send me from Hartville to Ava. And who do I end up with a bunkie but Dominic? Dominic, I don't want to tell his story too much, but he really had no business there. He wasn't supposed to be there. And I didn't know this at the time, but that's the guy who was literally right beneath me. In a phone call that I had with my sister Mary, she said, well, you know, there's somebody there who's going to say something that you need to hear. And it's a small space, so you can't really help but overhear everybody's conversations and every little thing that's happening. And Dominic talked about how it doesn't really matter. He wasn't even talking to me. He was talking to somebody else. I was eavesdropping because I was 2 feet away from my bed. He was talking to another fellow, and he said, you know, all of these things that you've done and all these things that you've gone through, God will turn them around for both your and His glory. And that struck me real hard. You know, I've given a very brief description of why I went to prison, but that's hardly the list of the bad things that I've done in my life. And, you know, when he came back to bed, I told him, I said, Dom, I don't know if what you said struck him, but it got me. And so that was literally the night my sister told me that there's somebody there who's going to say something you need to hear. The next day, I called Mom and I said, you know, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give my life to Jesus. But I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait because I don't want to be a jailhouse Christian. I don't want people saying, oh, the only reason I did this was because I was in jail. And so I'm going to wait. And Mom, ever so wise as she is, she said, no, son, don't wait. Do it now. So I go up, get Dom, who is sleeping. I said, hey, I told Mom that I was going to do what I was told. Mom said, do this. So wake up. Let's do this. And Dom, without hesitation, flings the blanket off, takes me over at the edge of the tables and led me to the Lord right there on the spot. And a friend of ours named Dallas, he jumped up when he saw what was happening, and he come over. He's in. And so it was done then. And I'm going to say I'm not a jailhouse Christian. Okay? I did not get out. I never told the court. I didn't up there, hey, I found Jesus, let me go home. Okay? That didn't happen. Didn't tell my lawyer. My family knew. My brother knew. But otherwise, this was here. The next day, Dominic was gone. He was sent home. I'm looking for a date here. Sorry. August 11th. It was a Sunday. And not a whole lot of books to read up in there, so I grabbed this book about prayer. You know, and in spite of the fact that I have been around my family who prayed all the time, I did not know how to pray. I knew the Lord's Prayer by heart, but I did not feel like I could approach. And I had told Mom at some point that. And I felt like any prayers I was pushing out there were just not being heard. I still felt like I was talking to a blank wall. So I read this book, and he started off that little booklet with a verse, and sorry if you want me to tell you the book, chapter, and verse, I can't do that yet. But it was, if you ask anything in my name, it shall be given. Well, I was a legal aid for a long time, and shall is mandatory language. So this means it has to happen. And so I said, all right. And, you know, the rest of that is, and if you believe. So I said, all right, here's the test for God. And I said, God, you know, I'm going to ask for something that I know, given my record, is very, very unlikely to happen. And what I asked for was, let me out of jail tomorrow. The next day, Monday, I was to go to court. So, normally the transportation officer would come down there to Douglas County and get me about 7 in the morning. I'd sit in the holding cell until it was my turn. 7 o'clock rolls around. He didn't come get me. I was scheduled for 1. Every hour. Still didn't come get me. 1 o'clock comes around, still didn't come get me. And I was like, I don't have to be there for that judge to let me out. That's what I kept saying. I just refuse to doubt. I'm going to just believe this is going to happen. At 2:30, they called me out and said, hey, you got court. Thinking I'm going to have video court because it's already late. No, the transportation officer happened to be passing through Ava, and they told him, hey, grab him and bring him up here. So I got up there to the court. I went straight from the cop car into the courtroom. And I sit down, and the lawyer says, hey, I need to let you know that a plea bargain has been placed on the table, which would let me out. It was a plea bargain that I figured was going to happen as the last option, not the first. And anybody who's been familiar with the justice system knows how that works. They don't offer the good ones up front. And of the 2 charges I was facing, the easiest one for them to prove, they said, well, we're just going to drop that. And that was weapons charges. We'll just drop that. Plea out to pushing your girlfriend and take some probation, we'll let you out. So I had told my lawyer right there, I said, well, I'm not the one who makes this decision. My family makes this decision because I've taken my hands off of it. She started off, talking about confidentiality. I said, there's no confidentiality between my family and I. You need to go over there and talk to them. Well, she was balking, but her assistant was absolutely jumped up and ran over there and told my family. So when I called my family, and they were still on their way home after court, and I asked what's going to happen. I believe Mary answered and said yes. My sister Anna was in the car. She said yes. I said, well, I need to hear from Mom, because as far as I was concerned, Mom was the final say in what was going to happen. And Mom says, well, that's an answer to prayer. Absolutely, do this. So out I am, and here I am. And I did write this one down. I say this because there's different people in here who have different pieces of that puzzle. Mary, Mom, my brother here, brother over here. They have these pieces. They are witness to segments of this. My family, who many of you were born while I was serving time for murder, didn't even know me, at least knew what I was there for. So you have pieces of the puzzle. Dad here was witness to a whole lot of the bad things that I was doing. And so the verse says that, it says, by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word shall be established. And so what's establishing here with me telling you this story about what God did for me is to establish those 2 or 3 witnesses that can validate the facts that I've just told you. And it was really, I did my best, folks. As a pagan, I did my best when I got out of here to be a good man. I didn't feel like a good man, but I did my best to be a good man. And when I gave my life to Christ, what ends up happening with me then is that darkness that I had found myself in after March 17th is gone. All right? Don't let these tears fool you. These are tears of happiness and gratitude. Okay? I emphasize the gratitude because nothing I could do could get me out of that dark place that I fell into on March 17th. Nothing I could do. I would put on a happy face and I'd go to work. Put on a happy face and go and visit my neighbors. But I couldn't get out of it. I didn't know how. But there is one who did know how. And so when I reached out and I asked, he answered, and he didn't waste time. And in the interim, I have continuously been asking, show me, this is Missouri, show me your presence in my life. Prove that you are actually a God who cares about me. I never stopped believing in God. I stopped believing that God cared about anything I did or anybody else. And I can tell you is that it's almost on a daily basis something happens. People come up to me and tell me that for some reason my story is being told by people I don't even know. I didn't tell them. This is the first time I've spoken publicly about it. I told God how absolutely lonely I was. And I set these standards really, really high, given my last relationship, that were almost too difficult to meet. And what ends up happening is that, and I had even said, if you follow me on Facebook, you'll see a post in there, that I looked at my sisters and their lives and how godly they are and how their lives are absolutely what I say it should be a godly home, and what they built in their houses and with their children and their families. And I was like, well, you know what, that's first and foremost, we're going to put it here. And then the next step to that was I said, I want somebody who's been down a similar path as me, which is not an easy path. There was a lot of bumps in the road that I tried to cope with initially through addiction, and otherwise it was mostly just keeping it to myself and saying, you know what, this is just something I have to live with. And I can tell you is that I don't have to live with it today. I don't have to live with the guilt and the shame that I had from all the stuff that I had done. And
Amen.
I've had this conversation. There's a big difference between guilt and remorse. Guilt is self-destructive. It'll eat you up inside. Remorse creates change. And the changes that have occurred in me over the last, I don't know, what are we looking at, 6 weeks or so now, are profound. And I'm just giving you a couple examples of this, but I can tell you is that God brought that woman into my life. And not only did she meet I had 10 different points on my list of the bullet points that, I wanted this. She did all that. Every single one of them. And then some that I didn't think they had to the list. But there they are. Things that are just very personal to me. I can't speak very highly of myself in this, because again, I was of the belief that if I did certain things, I would reap certain rewards. And that was just not the case. I had poured myself into serving gods that weren't, and I use the plural, gods. They were not responsive. One God was. In 31 years as a pagan, I cannot say one of the gods that I had served did anything. But I persisted. Because I'm hard-headed. Nobody ever accused me of learning stuff the easy way. But in this short time, since about July 30th, so many things have happened that I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I serve a God who answers prayers. I now serve a God who actually cares about what happens. And I'm floored by it. I'm absolutely floored by it. Because I went through so many years of just going through the motions hoping that there would be a response, but I never got it. And so I can tell you it's through no efforts of my own that I'm able to even sit here today. No efforts that I could do brought me to sitting here in front of my friends and family. You guys are awesome. It was through a God who answers prayers. Plain and simple. And so this thing is established. I am established as a Christian. I am established as a man who serves God. And I'm not here to contend against other people's religion. It's not my job. I'm here to talk about what it is that I've seen and heard, and that's it. I can tell you, I believe this wholly. If you feel like you're not getting responded to, I know one who does respond. And happy to help you get there. The man who led me to the Lord is here tonight, or today. And the fact that his presence in that jail, where I was, and he wasn't even supposed to be there, in and of itself says that God was working right there and on the spot.
Amen.
And I can tell you is that if I had got let out earlier, I wouldn't be here now. I would not have converted. If I had, obviously if I had died, I wouldn't be here now. But that man who was sitting there, it's a story that I was told, so I'm speaking in hearsay, is that when he was arrested, he was like, well, I guess there's something that God has for me to do. And wasn't that the truth? So, yeah, I'm going to stop with that. I'm about to be baptized here out there at the Blue Hole. And I would very much like for everybody here, if at all possible, be there to witness this. Because that's the laying to rest of, well, I believe that guy who was called Strider has already been laid to rest, but this is the symbolic death of that man. And the rising of Gabriel, who is the Son of God.
Amen.
And as far as I'm concerned, it's favored. So I'm going to stop at that.